It began as a love story that inspired everyone who knew them. A man standing beside his wife, day after day, pushing her, encouraging her, believing in her when no one else did. Together, they fought the battle of obesity. Together, they chased the dream of a better future. And when the scale finally showed what seemed impossible, over 150 pounds gone forever, friends cheered. Family applauded. Neighbors whispered with admiration. He was her rock, her shield, her protector. She often told people she could not have done it without him. Every step she took on the treadmill, he was there. Every tear shed over cravings and failures, he was there. Every pound lost, every inch vanished, he clapped, he kissed her forehead, he told her she was beautiful. But when the weight disappeared, something else vanished too. The balance of their marriage shifted in ways he could not have imagined. Because what he thought was their victory together, she soon began to see as her victory alone. And as she grew slimmer, more confident, and more visible to the world, the man who once stood as her savior slowly began to fade into the shadows. It should have been their happy ending. It should have been a testament to love and sacrifice. Instead, it became the beginning of a betrayal so deep, so cruel, that it would push a loyal husband past the breaking point of sanity. When she left him, she didn't just walk away. She walked into the arms of his boss, the man who signed his paychecks, who controlled his livelihood, who now also possessed his wife. And with that single act, she didn't just betray him. She humiliated him. The whispers began. At work, colleagues smirked behind his back. In the neighborhood, eyes lingered a little too long. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was public ridicule. He was the man who sacrificed everything for a woman. Only for her to discard him for someone higher on the ladder. That was when love curdled into something else. Something darker. Something violent. What he did next would leave the entire community frozen in shock. Police officers would struggle to hold back their own tears when describing the scene. Jurors would sit in silence as evidence unfolded. And even those who condemned him could not escape a haunting thought: how much betrayal can a human heart endure before it finally breaks? This is not just a story about weight loss. It is not just a story about marriage. It is the story of a man who gave everything, only to lose it all in the cruelest way possible. And when the betrayal became unbearable, he did the unthinkable. He met her at a time when she hid from the world. Her body was heavy with years of neglect, her spirit crushed by stares, whispers, and cruel jokes. She wore baggy clothes not out of comfort, but out of shame. She avoided cameras, avoided parties, avoided life itself. But he saw something else. He didn't see the weight. He didn't see the silence in her eyes or the way she flinched when people laughed. He saw the woman she was beneath it all. He saw kindness, loyalty, beauty. Where the world dismissed her, he leaned in closer. Where others looked away, he reached for her hand. Their love grew in quiet places. In the back of coffee shops, in long phone calls that stretched into dawn, in the safe cocoon of shared vulnerability. She told him she feared never being enough. He told her she was already everything. When he asked her to marry him, she cried, not because she doubted his love, but because she couldn't understand why he would choose her. But he did. And when they stood at the altar, he meant every vow. In sickness and in health. For better or worse. The early years of their marriage were ordinary to the outside world, but to him, they were golden. He loved the way she smiled when she cooked, the way she curled against him at night, the way her laughter lit up their home. He didn't care about her size. He only cared that she was his. But she cared. Deeply. Quietly. She dreamed of being smaller, of being confident, of walking into a room without shame burning her skin. And when she finally decided to lose the weight, she thought she was alone in the battle. But he told her she wasn't. He promised her that every step she took, he would take too. And he did. He woke at dawn to jog beside her, even when his lungs burned and his legs begged for rest. He learned how to cook differently, teaching himself how to prepare meals that nourished instead of numbed. When she cried from cravings, he held her. When she screamed in frustration at the slow pace of change, he whispered that progress was still progress. Every pound she lost, he celebrated like a war won. He kissed her forehead, called her beautiful, told her he was proud. And slowly, her body began to transform. The woman who once hid from mirrors began to linger in front of them. The woman who once avoided crowds began to walk with her head a little higher. But even as her body changed, his love did not. He was steady. Unshaken. Fiercely loyal. She was his world, and he was willing to sacrifice anything for her happiness. He gave up his own time. His own hobbies. His own comfort. When she needed him, he was there. When she faltered, he carried her. When she triumphed, he cheered louder than anyone. By the time she had lost more than 150 pounds, her transformation was complete. The world looked at her differently now. Strangers noticed her. Compliments poured in. She smiled more, laughed louder, moved with a confidence he had never seen before. To him, it was everything he had ever wanted, for her to feel strong, radiant, alive. But what he could not see, what he refused to even imagine, was that as she shed the weight, she was also shedding him. What he saw as their journey, she began to see as her journey. What he believed was their victory, she began to claim as her own. And in the silence of those moments, in the unseen cracks of their marriage, a shadow began to grow. He still looked at her like she was the woman he married. But she had started to look at him like he was the man she had outgrown. At first, it was little things. The kind of changes people dismiss, the subtle shifts that hide in the corners of everyday life. She started staying late at work. She laughed more at her phone than she did at his jokes. She dressed differently, carefully, like she was preparing for someone else's eyes. He told himself it was nothing. He told himself she deserved to feel beautiful, to enjoy her new life, her new confidence. After all, hadn't he been the one to fight beside her? Hadn't he been the one who built this new world for her? He believed in her, trusted her, loved her. Why would he suspect anything else? But there were nights when she came home smelling of cologne that wasn't his. Days when she brushed off his questions with laughter that sounded more like guilt than joy. And slowly, a sickness began to grow inside him. A whisper he tried to ignore. A thought too cruel to entertain. Then the truth came crashing in. She was leaving him. When she finally spoke the words, his entire body went cold. He thought he misheard her, thought his mind had twisted her sentence into something it wasn't. But no, she meant it. She was leaving. And not for freedom, not to rediscover herself, not to chase some dream she had long buried. She was leaving for another man. His breath caught in his throat as she spoke his name. And in that moment, the betrayal deepened into something unbearable. Because the man she had chosen wasn't just anyone. It was his boss. The man who controlled his job. The man who shook his hand every morning. The man who smiled as though they were friends. His world split in two. It wasn't just a broken marriage. It was humiliation. Every laugh in the office now carried a new meaning. Every whisper seemed directed at him. He was no longer the loyal husband who gave everything. He was the fool who had lost his wife to the very man he worked under. He replayed their journey over and over in his mind. The early mornings, the miles run in the rain, the dinners cooked with care. The nights he stayed awake holding her when she wanted to give up. The years of sacrifice, devotion, love. And now it was all discarded, like it meant nothing. She had traded loyalty for excitement. Devotion for power. A husband for a boss. Friends tried to console him, but their words felt empty. Family told him to move on, but how could he? How does a man erase the image of his wife, his world? Falling into the arms of someone who should have been untouchable. The betrayal hollowed him out. Every corner of the house reminded him of her. Every space felt poisoned. The bed where they once whispered dreams now felt like a graveyard. He ate alone. He sat in silence. He scrolled through pictures of her new life, each one slicing him open a little deeper. But what hurt the most was that she seemed happy. Radiant. Alive. As if their years together had never existed. As if he was nothing more than a stepping stone she had used to climb higher. And the worst part? He still loved her. Even in the rawness of betrayal, even in the humiliation, he longed for her. Longed for the way she once smiled only at him, the way she once reached for his hand in the dark. He clung to memories that no longer belonged to him, desperate for scraps of a love that had already been buried. But beneath the longing, beneath the pain, something else began to stir. A heat, slow and steady, burning through the fog of heartbreak. He began to see not just what he had lost, but what had been stolen. His marriage. His dignity. His very reason for being. And in that burning silence, he made a promise to himself. If they had destroyed him, if they had torn his life apart, then they would not walk away unscathed. The betrayal that broke his heart would awaken something else. Something darker. After she left, silence became his closest companion. Nights stretched on like endless tunnels, filled only with the echo of his thoughts. The house that once rang with her laughter was now suffocating. The bed where she once slept curled into his chest became a hollow expanse of emptiness. Every corner, every object, every memory whispered her name. He tried to go on. He tried to work, to eat, to breathe. But nothing felt real. At the office, he could not escape the sight of his boss. The man who now had what he had lost. The man who wore triumph like a smirk. Every handshake, every glance, felt like mockery. Colleagues whispered behind his back. He could feel their eyes following him, their pity cutting deeper than knives. To them, he was not just a man who had been betrayed. He was a man who had been replaced, by his own superior. And every passing day, the humiliation grew heavier, crushing him beneath its weight. At night, when he closed his eyes, he saw them together. He saw her smile at him the way she once smiled at him. He saw her fingers entwined with another's. He saw his boss's hand resting on the small of her back, claiming what was once sacred. Each image tore him apart. So he stopped sleeping. Instead, he began to watch. He learned her routines, her patterns. He followed her social media, scrolling through photos until dawn, memorizing every detail of her new life. Every smile she gave, every outfit she wore, every restaurant she visited, all of it felt like salt on open wounds. But obsession doesn't stop at screens. Soon, he found himself driving past her new apartment, parking in the shadows, staring at the lights glowing through the window. Sometimes, he thought he saw her silhouette moving inside. Sometimes, he thought he saw her silhouette moving inside. Sometimes, he saw his boss's car parked outside. And each time, the rage inside him grew hotter. He told himself he just needed closure, just needed to see for himself. But deep down, he knew it wasn't closure he was after. It was control. Control over the chaos that had consumed him. Control over the betrayal that had stolen his life. Memories replayed like broken records. The nights he cooked her meals while she cried over cravings. The mornings he laced up his shoes to run beside her in the rain. The afternoons he whispered encouragement when she wanted to quit. He had given her everything. His time. His energy. His love. And now, all of it had been handed over to another man, like a gift stolen from its rightful owner. The pain twisted into a belief. A dangerous, unshakable belief. That this wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. Theft of his wife. Theft of his dignity. Theft of his entire existence. He began to imagine what it would take to make it stop. What it would take to silence the whispers, to erase the images, to reclaim the pieces of himself that had been stripped away. These thoughts crept in quietly at first, like shadows at the edge of a room. But soon, they filled every corner of his mind. Friends told him to move on. Family begged him to let go. But how could he? How does a man simply walk away from the woman he built his life around? From the love he poured himself into? From the betrayal that cut so deep, it left him bleeding even in silence. He became consumed. Every day at work was torture. Every night at home was hell. And slowly, the line between love and hate blurred. Because the truth was undeniable. He still loved her. He hated her for leaving, for betraying, for humiliating him, but he loved her still. And that is the most dangerous kind of love. The kind that refuses to die. The kind that festers and rots until it poisons everything it touches. It was no longer enough to watch from the shadows. No longer enough to replay memories. No longer enough to suffer in silence. The obsession had taken root. It whispered to him in the dark. It followed him into daylight. It told him there was only one way to end the torment. Only one way to reclaim the dignity that had been stripped from him. And as he listened to that whisper, it grew louder, until it became the only voice he could hear. The night it happened was deceptively ordinary. The kind of night when streets are quiet, windows glow with warm light, and the world seems at peace. But inside him, there was no peace. Only a storm, building louder with every breath, with every thought, with every memory of betrayal that burned through his veins like fire. He sat in his car, parked just beyond the glow of the streetlights. The steering wheel shook beneath his grip. His heart hammered, not with fear, but with fury. In his mind, he replayed every moment. Her tears on the treadmill, her laughter when she thought she couldn't go on, his voice telling her she could. He replayed every meal he cooked, every sacrifice he made, every late night he held her while she whispered that she was not strong enough. And then, like a knife twisting in his chest, he replayed the last time he saw her smile. But it wasn't at him. It was at his boss. The man who now had everything he had given his life for. Hours passed in silence. The world outside moved on, but inside that car, time stopped. He was a man torn open, stripped of dignity, stripped of love, stripped of everything that once gave him reason to live. Finally, he stepped out. The night air was heavy, damp, almost suffocating. His footsteps echoed against the pavement as he moved closer. In his hands was the weight of a weapon, not just of steel, but of rage, of heartbreak, of betrayal made solid and deadly. Then he saw them. They were together. Laughing. Her face radiant, lit up in a way he hadn't seen in years. His boss's hand brushed her arm, and she leaned into it as if it belonged there. That single image shattered the last thread of restraint inside him. In that moment, every sacrifice felt meaningless. Every promise, every vow, every ounce of love, gone. He saw not two people in love, but two thieves who had stolen everything from him. His wife. His pride. His life. And something inside him snapped. The sound of the first shot tore through the quiet night, sharp and merciless. Windows lit up. Dogs barked. A scream followed, piercing, raw, filled with terror. Another shot rang out. Then silence. Neighbors woke to chaos, stumbling from their beds, voices trembling as they dialed for help. The street filled with confusion, fear, and disbelief. But by the time sirens wailed and lights flashed red and blue against the houses, it was too late. He stood there, weapon in hand, staring at what he had done. His chest heaved, his hands shook, but his eyes were empty. The man who once gave everything to save her had destroyed it all in an instant. What he did was not an accident. It was not a crime of passion, though passion had fueled it. It was the unthinkable, the moment when heartbreak curdled into violence, when love twisted into destruction, when a loyal husband became something else entirely. The courtroom was silent. Not the kind of silence born of order, but the kind of silence that hangs heavy, suffocating, as if the very air carries sorrow. He stood there, head bowed, hands trembling, a broken man awaiting judgment. The story spilled out piece by piece. Jurors sat frozen as they heard of his devotion, the early morning spent running beside her, the meals prepared with love, the sacrifices made without hesitation. Some wept when they realized how deeply he had loved her. Others shook their heads, unable to understand how love could twist into violence so dark. His wife's betrayal was laid bare for all to hear. The affair with his boss. The humiliation that spread through the community like wildfire. And for a moment, even those who condemned his actions found themselves asking the same haunting question: how much pain can one man endure before he breaks? When the verdict was read, the gavel struck like thunder. Guilty. His shoulders sagged as if the word itself had crushed him. He would spend the rest of his life behind bars, and yet the punishment seemed small compared to the emptiness in his eyes. Because prison was not his greatest sentence. His greatest sentence was living with the truth, that he had destroyed the very woman he once lived to protect. The community was left fractured, struggling to reconcile the man they once admired with the killer he had become. To some, he was a monster, consumed by jealousy and rage. To others, he was a victim of betrayal, pushed beyond the limits of a human heart. But no matter which side they chose, one fact could never be erased: a love story that began with sacrifice ended in blood. And as the doors of the courtroom closed, a chilling lesson remained. Love can heal. Love can lift. But love, when twisted by betrayal and obsession, can become the most dangerous weapon of all.